Dubai air, thick with the scent of oud and distant jasmine, offered little solace. Zahra, a woman carved from the city's own ancient lineage, felt its oppressive weight, a silken veil against her skin, heavy and stifling. She sat alone in the vast majlis, a grand hall of polished marble and intricate mosaic, where generations of Al-Hassan patriarchs had dispensed wisdom and shaped destinies. The room's opulence, usually a source of quiet pride, now felt like a gilded cage. Sunlight, a fierce golden spear, pierced the high arched windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the heavy air, a silent, swirling testament to time passing without her participation. Her body, a fragile vessel after Zayed's birth, ached with a deep, pervasive weariness that extended beyond mere physicality. It resided in her spirit, a hollow cavern where joy once echoed. Her eyes, usually keen and observant, were shadowed with an unshed grief, a profound sense of loss that clung to her like the desert humidity. Each breath was a shallow effort, each heartbeat a testament to a life she no longer recognized as her own. She was a silent, beautiful sculpture amidst the vibrant tapestry of family, present yet utterly detached, her thoughts a tangled web of unspoken sorrows. The murmur of voices from a distant courtyard, the clink of porcelain, the gentle strum of an oud, all faded into a dull, indistinguishable hum. The world continued, oblivious to the profound chasm that had opened within her. Her fingers, adorned with ancestral rings, traced the cool, smooth patterns on the silk cushion beside her, seeking an anchor that refused to hold. The solitude here was not chosen, but imposed, a consequence of a sorrow too vast for shared expression. She was adrift, a lone star in a sky suddenly devoid of constellations. A soft rustle broke through her reverie, a presence, warm and familiar, drawing near. "Why are you sitting here all by yourself, my dear?" The soft inquiry, spoken with a tenderness Zahra rarely allowed to surface, gently pulled Layla from the profound depths of her solitary contemplation. A flicker of surprise, fleeting yet distinct, crossed her shadowed features before she turned, her movements slow, deliberate, as if each action carried an unspoken weight. Layla's gaze, usually downcast or fixed on Zayed, now met Zahra's, a silent acknowledgement passing between the two women who, despite their disparate stations, shared a common thread of unspoken grief and profound maternal love. The elegant matriarch, her haute couture abaya a swirl of deep indigo, settled gracefully onto an adjacent cushion, her presence radiating a quiet authority tempered by genuine concern. The air, previously thick with Zahra's own oppressive thoughts, now held a different kind of stillness, charged with an emerging intimacy. I find peace here sometimes." Layla's voice was a low murmur, barely audible above the distant hum of the palace, betraying a vulnerability she rarely displayed. Her fingers, still tracing the intricate patterns on the silk, trembled almost imperceptibly. The quiet, "It reminds me of a different time." A pause, heavy with unspoken burdens, settled between them. Zahra observed her, her sharp, knowing eyes reflecting a wisdom gleaned from years of navigating the complex currents of the Al-Hassan dynasty. She offered no platitudes, no facile reassurances, but merely a steady, empathetic presence, allowing Layla the space to speak or remain silent as she chose. The gentle rustle of Zahra's silk, the faint scent of amber, created a small, safe harbor in the vast majlis. Layla drew a slow, deliberate breath, as if steeling herself to unveil a deeply guarded part of her soul. "Before I came here, I had a child, a boy." Her voice cracked, a fragile sound that broke the elegant silence. "He was very small, and he didn't stay long." The words hung in the air, heavy with a grief that resonated with Zahra's own, a universal lament for a love lost too soon. Layla's eyes, now wet with unshed tears, looked far beyond the opulent walls, into a past where a different life, a different future, had briefly flickered and then extinguished. The quiet dignity she usually carried, a shield against the world's harsh judgments, now softened, revealing the raw wound beneath. Zahra's hand, cool and slender, reached out to gently cover Layla's, a gesture of profound, unspoken understanding. There was no pity in her touch, only a shared acknowledgement of the enduring sorrow that binds all mothers who have known loss. "My dear, to carry such a burden, it changes you." Zahra's voice was soft, her gaze unwavering, recognizing the strength it took for Layla to speak of such pain. This revelation, spoken in the hushed intimacy of the majlis, cast a new light on Layla's fierce devotion to Zayed, transforming what Khalid perceived as defiance into a profound, almost sacred act of nurturing. It complicated the easy anger and indignation that had consumed him, replacing it with the insidious ache of guilt, a recognition of the careless cruelty of his earlier actions. Zahra felt the brittle shame of her family, a silent testament to the walls of pride and privilege that had prevented them from seeing Layla's inherent humanity, her quiet resilience forged in the fires of personal tragedy. The matriarch knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her bones, that this woman, with her profound capacity for love and sorrow, was far more than just a caregiver. She was a mirror reflecting the hidden depths of their own hearts. The weight of the unspoken began to shift, a subtle rearrangement of the shadows in the grand hall. The Moore estate, once a monument to veiled sorrows and cold grandeur, now echoed with a different kind of solemnity, a profound shift from enforced silence to an earnest commitment to remembrance. The blueprints for the Amina Moore Memorial Garden unfolded across a heavy mahogany table in Khalid's study, replacing legal documents and financial reports with sketches of indigenous flora and tranquil water features. Each line, each proposed stone path, spoke of healing, a tangible aspiration to cultivate growth where only barren grief had once flourished. The nursing scholarship, established in Amina's name, was not merely a gesture of philanthropy, but a living testament to her unwavering spirit, a promise to empower those who dared to speak truth to power. The hidden infinity pool oasis, previously a poignant symbol of erasure, was slowly being reimagined, its still dark waters now reflecting not forgotten shadows, but the clear light of newfound clarity, a sacred space reclaimed for quiet contemplation and honor. Public pressure, a relentless tide that had swept away the carefully constructed facade of the Al Hassan dynasty, continued to mount, its force compelling institutional reforms at Al Fajr Behavioral Clinic, forcing a long overdue reckoning with its unethical past. The once impregnable walls of privilege began to show hairline fractures, allowing a cleansing breeze of accountability to sweep through the hallowed halls. Layla, her resolve forged in the crucible of her own quiet suffering, observed these changes with a steady gaze, a deep sense of purpose settling within her. She understood that this transformation was not instantaneous, but an arduous, ongoing process, a continuous peeling back of layers, a slow unraveling of generations of carefully guarded secrets. The weight of the world, once born in solitary anguish, now felt shared, a collective endeavor toward a more just and empathetic future. The desert, unforgiving yet eternally patient, watched as the Al Hassan legacy began its painful, hopeful metamorphosis, turning its face towards a dawn long denied. This was merely the beginning of their journey, a single, hopeful chapter in a story that had yet to fully unfold. The whispers of the past, once faint and easily ignored, were slowly gathering strength, poised to become a resounding chorus, echoing across the vast, shifting sands of time, demanding to be heard. The subtle scent of desert rose and fresh earth now permeated the air, replacing the heavy oud, a tangible sign of new life taking root. The delicate perfume, a blend of wild desert flora and damp soil, softened the palace's grand, silent spaces, a relief from the cloying opulence that had long defined it. Layla, senses attuned to these shifts, felt a quiet stirring within her, an almost imperceptible breath of anticipation, as if the Al Hassan estate itself exhaled. Her days fell into the gentle rhythm of caring for Zayed. The infant's soft sighs and contented murmurs became the truest measure of time in the vast, echoing chambers. She moved through mahogany-paneled rooms with light steps, a silent counterpoint to a household still wrestling with hidden currents, a delicate dance between old sorrow and nascent hope. Rania's lingering glances, sharp and laced with unspoken resentment, continued to punctuate the quiet, a reminder of rigid social strata. Yet Layla found solace in the child's innocent dependence, a balm for the social isolation that clung to her like fine desert dust, a quiet shield against the world's judgments. One afternoon, drawn by a soft light from a seldom-used wing, Layla approached Amina's former study, a room long shrouded in reverent quiet. The usually closed door stood ajar. A single sunbeam cut through the air, illuminating motes that danced like time made visible. Curiosity tugged at her and she stepped inside. The air was cool, holding the faded scent of old paper and dried flowers, an echo of a life once lived there. In a corner stood a small, carved wooden desk, its polished surface dusted with neglect, yet hinting at hidden elegance. Among forgotten trinkets and leather-bound journals, a child's rattle of dark polished wood caught her eye, its surface worn smooth by countless touches. It lay beside a fragile scroll tied with a faded ribbon. Her fingers brushed an almost imperceptible engraving at the rattle's base. RM. A tremor passed through her, a whisper of ancestral memory of lost innocence. The rattle felt oddly potent, heavier than its size, carrying an untold story. Nearby, on a slender pedestal, a desert rose slept beneath a glass dome. Its crystalline petals held the blush of perpetual twilight, a fragile testament to beauty in harsh lands. Within its folds, she noticed a small yellowed note. A quiet conviction took root in Layla. These objects were not mere relics, but breadcrumbs leading to a truth deliberately obscured, a constructed narrative beginning to unravel. The study's silence deepened, charged with a new tension, a nascent mystery awaiting revelation. She felt the weight of history in her hands, a whispered secret long patient for hearing. The walls, once decorative, seemed to pulse with a hidden narrative, beckoning her deeper into the Al-Hassan legacy, hinting at a sorrow grander and more intricate than she'd imagined. The scent of desert rose drew her further, inviting her to uncover the concealed depths of this opulent, melancholic world. This quiet discovery in Amina's sanctuary was not an end, but a tender beginning, a fragile thread in a larger tapestry poised to unfurl with the softest whisper. The fragile note, brittle with age, yielded to Layla's careful touch, its surface crackling faintly as she unfolded it. The script, a delicate calligraphy now faded to sepia, spoke of a clandestine love, a hope blossoming in the shadowed corners of the Al-Hassan legacy, carefully concealed from the world's harsh gaze. It was a secret history, whispered across generations, now stirring to life in her hands, its silent testimony a stark contrast to the opulence surrounding her.
Each word, a ghost from the past, seemed to resonate with the quiet strength of Amina herself, revealing a heart yearning for freedom, a spirit chafing against the gilded confines of tradition. The rattle, still in her other hand, felt less like a child's toy and more like a talisman, tangible link to a story deliberately buried, a life tragically cut short. She traced the initials RM.
Again, a name now imbued with a poignant significance, connecting it to the tender, urgent words on the note. A profound sadness settled over her, a recognition of the sacrifices made, the dreams deferred, the love that dared to defy the rigid expectations of a powerful family. The desert rose, pristine under its glass dome, seemed to pulse with a silent energy, a vibrant heart within the tranquil sanctuary. Its crystalline petals, a study in resilience, mirrored the quiet strength Layla had come to embody, a silent witness to the unfolding truths. She felt a profound connection to Amina, an empathetic bond transcending time and circumstance, recognizing a kindred spirit in the woman who had dared to dream beyond her prescribed role. This was not merely an act of discovery, it was a communion, a shared understanding of burdens and aspirations that resonated deeply within her own spirit. The vast majlis, with its polished marble and intricate mosaics, now felt less like a cage and more like a stage, awaiting the full revelation of its hidden dramas. The silence in Amina's study was no longer a void, but a presence, filled with the echoes of untold stories, demanding to be heard. Layla understood, with a clarity that sharpened her resolve, that she was not just an observer in this grand narrative, but an unwitting participant, chosen by fate to unravel its intricate threads. The weight of history, once a distant concept, now settled upon her shoulders, a sacred trust, a call to illuminate the darkest corners of a legacy steeped in both glory and sorrow. The air, once heavy with the scent of oud and distant jasmine, now carried the faint, sweet perfume of revelation, a breath of nascent change sweeping through the hallowed halls, promising a reckoning long overdue. She knew that uncovering these truths would be a perilous journey, a challenge to the very foundations of the Al-Hassan dynasty, but a necessary one, a path she was now compelled to walk. The quiet hum of the palace, a constant backdrop to her days, seemed to deepen, vibrating with the unspoken anticipation of what was to come, a silent testament to the powerful forces now set in motion. The scent of desert, rose, and fresh earth, once a subtle shift, now enveloped her, a fragrant harbinger of the profound metamorphosis awaiting the Sheikh project. This quiet discovery in Amina's sanctuary had ignited a fire within her, a burning curiosity that would not be quelled, propelling her forward into the heart of a mystery yearning for light. She felt a subtle shift in the air, a quickening of time, as if the very walls of the estate held their breath, poised for the next revelation. A new urgency moved beneath Layla's skin, less a fear than a summons. She left the study carrying the rattle and the folded note like contraband, weaving through corridors that suddenly felt less decorative and more complicit. In the library's lamplight, she spread Amina's letters across a low table and began to cross-reference names, dates, and oblique references. There were mentions of visits that never appeared on any ledger, appointments struck out and refiled under ambiguous headings, and a curious steadiness of handwriting on certain official pages that suggested more than clerical oversight. Where Amina wrote of hiding Rashid's laughter beneath a scarf of normalcy, institutional files named him in ways that erased the person, patient numbers replacing names, euphemisms for transfer, and single-line entries that stopped abruptly as if someone had decided a story should not continue. The discrepancies accumulated like small coins in a hollow jar, each one too cold to be accidental. Layla traced a chart where dates slid like shadows, showing a period of absence in Rashid's life, coinciding with an expense report for specialized accommodations. The clinic's internal memos referred to relocation protocol with an economy of language that disguised intent. Amina's letters, by contrast, were raw and human, pleas to protect, coded references to safe houses, quick sketches of faces and laughter, and they suggested active resistance rather than passive resignation. The contrast between bureaucratic language and intimate testimony unsettled Layla. The files insisted on a tidy administrative fiction, the letters testified to stealth and love. She summoned Jumana quietly, asking for vantage points within Al-Fajr that required discretion. The administrator's hands trembled when Layla showed the note, but courage burned in her eyes. Together they opened patient registries that had been rendered opaque by years of polite obfuscation. Layla watched Jumana's fingers move through microfiche, copy logs, and sealed envelopes. Names were excised, initials substituted for full identities, and entire pages had been apparently removed from access lists. In one drawer, they discovered a ledger that recorded a recurring payment to an unnamed project, its bank codes tracing back to shell entities linked to foundations the family had publicly endorsed. The pattern smelled of deliberate arrangement. Each uncovered omission deepened an intuitive conclusion. Rashid's disappearance had not been a private misfortune, but a managed outcome. The quiet architecture of institutional language had been pressed into service to render a boy invisible. The implication was corrosive. Power had not merely closed ranks, but had engineered erasure through systems designed to protect reputations. Those systems were large, impersonal, and therefore harder to confront. They were where men like Khalid's father had placed their armor, believing bureaucracy could outlast conscience. Layla's resolve hardened into action that evening. She understood that exposing what the files sought to hide would require more than revelation. It would require allies who could translate paper ghosts into public truth. The rattle in her pocket felt heavier now, an accusation and a talisman. Outside, the estate's stones held their familiar cool. Inside, in the faint radial glow of the library lamp, Layla folded Amina's letter back into its slit and closed the ledger with careful hands. The silence that followed was not empty, but charged, waiting for the first move in a confrontation that would force the invisible into the light. Layla entered Khalid's sky lounge without ceremony. The city beneath them, a scatter of indifferent lights. She held Amina's relics like a challenge, the note and the rattle small and weighty at once. Khalid glanced up from his meticulous ledgers, as if a fault line had been named. The composure that usually sheltered him fractured almost immediately. When Layla spoke Rashid's name, slow and deliberate, denial lunged before sorrow could. He bristled, body taut, as if the room itself had insulted a sacred, unexamined truth. The worn initials and brittle script were met with a cold dismissal, an error, a misread grief, a fabrication aimed at the family's honor. His voice hardened around words of duty, legacy, and the inviolability of what his father had once decreed. Zahra entered like a memory made flesh, her steps quiet but inexorable. She did not soften the charge so much as redirect it, turning accusation into obligation. She reminded Khalid of the nights when his father's presence had filled their halls like a law, of the unspoken rules that had governed what could and could not be named. Her tone was not one of conspiracy, but of account, a stern insistence that truth must be faced even when it threatens the pillars of pride. The late patriarch's authority lingered like an heirloom in the room, invisible yet shaping every reflex, every defensive block. To acknowledge Rashid's erasure was to contradict that legacy, and Khalid's fury was born of a more complicated sorrow than Layla had encountered before. The confrontation widened, the lounge becoming a small arena where private grief and dynastic preservation collided. Servants paused in doorways, conversations stilled in corridors. The estate's usual choreography faltered. Khalid's anger flickered between righteous protection and raw, unsettled guilt. Zahra's words peeled back layers of habit and obedience, exposing how silence had been cultivated into policy. Layla watched them both, the rattle like a pulse in her palm, as family allegiances rearranged themselves before her eyes. Some faces clung to the old cadence of denial, others, quieter and older, listened as if remembering a long-forgotten whisper. Khalid's posture shifted from attack to emptiness, as if a cold hollow had opened behind his stern expression. He set his palm on the ledger not to count columns but to steady a body suddenly unmoored. The notion that his father might have sanctioned cruelty hovered unspoken, an accusation that fractured loving memory and reverence. Zahra held him to a different standard than public prestige. She asked him to choose between the altar of reputation and the relief of truth. The room did not resolve. It contracted, waiting. Outside, the city continued its indifferent vigil, but inside the Al-Hassan world a decision gathered weight, poised to rend the family into new truths or to bury them once more. A profound stillness descended, heavier than the metallic tang that permeated the opulent lounge, as Zahra's words hung in the charged air, stripping away Khalid's carefully constructed defenses. For a moment the world outside, its shimmering skyline and distant hum, vanished, leaving only echoes of a truth he had tried to bury. The fury that had flared in him guttered, replaced by cold dread, a recognition of the fissures Zahra had exposed. He looked from Layla's steadfast gaze, unwavering despite his aggression, to his mother's stern, sorrowful eyes, and felt the weight of generations of silence. The grand hall, once a symbol of his family's unassailable power, now felt like a mausoleum of forgotten injustices. Khalid's jaw tightened as inherited pride battled dawning comprehension. He wanted to lash out, deny, escape the suffocating implications, but Zahra's presence barred him. Her calm authority, rooted in a deeper grasp of their legacy's fragility, forced him to confront the possibility that his revered father was culpably deceitful. The hidden infinity pool oasis, once a vague poetic idea, crystallized as a deliberate concealment, its tranquil surface a veneer over an unspeakable act. The rattle and faded note in Layla's hand were no longer trinkets, but damning evidence, whispering of a love and life erased. He felt certain the supposed death of Rashid had been fabricated to protect the family image. The air thrummed with unspoken accusations, indicting the bedrock of his existence. Khalid's usually precise mind swam with memories. A photograph glimpsed, then put away. Elders' hushed talk cut short, the melancholy that shadowed Zahra's radiant moments. These fragments, once dismissed, coalesced into a tapestry of deceit. Golden light through the lounge's windows dimmed, casting accusing shadows across furnishings and turning the luxury into a chamber of revelations. He realized Layla's battle was not with him, but for a truth that could redeem or shatter their name. Shock gave way to a cold, logical assessment, a trait he inherited and now wielded against his father's legacy. Mounting public pressure, whispers of reform, the planned memorial garden, and Layla's conviction were not easily dismissed. Zahra's words opened a door he could not close, revealing a path of peril and a different kind of honor. A fragile alliance took shape in the silence, forged not of trust, but of necessity. He knew with agonizing clarity that continuing the deception would invite greater public ruin. Silence had served its purpose. Its shell was cracking. The scent of desert rose and fresh earth, once comfort, mingled with the metallic tang, a reminder that the Al-Hassan foundations faced a profound test, demanding a reckoning that would reshape their future. The weight of ancestral burdens promised a turbulent, transformative journey ahead, whose full extent he could not yet fathom. A profound unease settled within Khalid, a chill that seeped deeper than the air-conditioned opulence of the Sky Lounge. The metallic tang, once a mere scent, now felt like a taste in his mouth, acrid and foreboding, a stark contrast to the distant, comforting perfume of desert rose. He looked at Layla, her quiet strength an unnerving mirror to his own inherited power, and a subtle shift began in his understanding. What had been a battle of wills now morphed into a grim partnership, bound by the unforgiving threads of buried truth. The initial shock had given way to a calculating practicality, a cold assessment of the damage control required, a trait honed by generations of navigating the treacherous currents of high-stakes business and dynastic politics. He knew the cost of public scandal, the irreversible stain on a name that had always stood for impregnable honor. The path Zara had laid before him, while fraught with peril, offered a glimmer of redemption, a chance to dismantle the gilded cage of deceit his father had so meticulously constructed. His mind, sharp and strategic, began to piece together the implications. Rashid's disappearance was not merely a family secret. It was a cornerstone of their present reality, a meticulously maintained illusion. The weight of this revelation pressed down, a physical burden on his shoulders, forcing him to reconsider every interaction, every hushed conversation, every unexplained absence. He thought of his own childhood, punctuated by a silence around Rashid that had always felt heavier than any spoken word, a void he had learned to navigate without question. Now, that void screamed with injustice. Layla, still holding the rattle and the fragile note, represented not an adversary, but a catalyst, an unexpected force that had dared to pry open the most carefully sealed chambers of their past. The confrontation with Zara had been a crucible, melting away the layers of his ingrained denial, leaving him with the raw, uncomfortable truth. The vastness of the task ahead became clear. They would need to navigate the labyrinthine corridors of their own history, facing not only external scrutiny, but also the internal rot that had festered for decades. He pictured the sprawling Al-Hassan archives, usually a repository of meticulously catalogued success, now a potential minefield of suppressed information. He imagined the subtle resistance they would encounter, the ingrained loyalty of long-serving retainers, the silent complicity of those who had benefited from the deception. Yet, a nascent resolve hardened within him. The shame of his family, once a distant abstract, was now a palpable presence, demanding a reckoning. He understood that the pursuit of this truth would redefine his legacy, perhaps even shatter it. But the alternative, to allow the deceit to continue, was no longer an option. The silent whispers of the past, once easily ignored, now converged into a resounding demand for justice, a chorus that could no longer be silenced. The air, once heavy with the promise of revelation, now crackled with the energy of a storm about to break. He recognized the profound shift within himself, a tectonic plate moving beneath the surface of his carefully ordered world, promising not just change, but a complete reordering. The journey, he realized, was not just about Rashid or Amina or Layla. It was about the very soul of the Al-Hassan dynasty and his own place within its unfolding narrative. He tightened his jaw, preparing for the turbulent seas ahead, knowing that the most dangerous currents often lay hidden beneath the calmest surfaces. The silence that had once protected them was now a suffocating shroud, and only by tearing it away could they truly breathe. A new dawn, cold and unforgiving, was breaking over the desert, promising to illuminate every hidden corner. Khalid moved through the family archives as though each shelf might give way beneath him, the rooms full of patient dust and decisions. Layla perched at the long table, attentive in a way that made him look twice at her. She unfolded evidence with the careful tenderness of someone who knew a body could be healed by being seen. Zara lingered near the doorway, the silhouette of a woman who had crossed from accusation into purpose. Beneath a false bottom, they found a narrow lockbox, its metal eaten by time. Inside, oilcloth unrolled into a revelation. Small, battered notebooks bound with thread and annotated in two distinct hands. The first set of pages belonged to Samira, and the voice that rose from those margins was neither apologetic nor afraid. Her notes read like midnight reconnaissance. Precise times, doses logged with the rigor of a nurse who refused to be careless about particulars, the names of medications that appeared with no corresponding purchase orders, and recurring entries about patients sedated on schedules that matched nights when visitors claimed to have left. Her tone sharpened as the notebooks progressed. Clinical observation folded into moral outrage, and she recorded with steady clarity how practices at Al-Fajr blurred into orchestration. She wrote of doctors signing papers without presence, of ward protocols that masked transfers, of a philosophy that reduced people to case numbers and reputations. Interleaved were pages written in Amina's handwriting, shaped by fear and insistence. At first, Amina recorded times and names, as if keeping a private log might anchor her sanity. Then the entries compressed, sentences broken by tremor and haste, nights when she was taken from her bed, conversations rewritten on official forms, a counselor who insisted that family honor required compliance. One passage described being escorted through fluorescent corridors beneath the cover of dusk, signatures procured in the glow of a phone, the pretense of consent arranged like a curtain between truth and law. Another detailed a consultation where her complaints were reframed as symptomatology and her protests reduced to delusions on a file. Reading those pages was a public unraveling. Layla found a folded sketch Amina had tucked between lines, a window drawn with uneven bars, and the hopeful smudge of a sky beyond. Zara's face softened and then tightened. Grief and rage shared the same muscles. Khalid felt the archive shift under him, no longer an inert store of prestige, but a ledger of inflicted erasure. The notebooks offered not only accusation, but direction. Names to be traced, dates to verify, registries to subpoena. Marginal notes pointed to a pattern of collusion between private practitioners and administrative officers who profited from silence. The team catalogued everything with methodical care, fingers stained with the graphite of truth. They copied entries, photographed marginalia, mapped the network that linked clinic, lawyers, and registries. Each new detail enlarged the moral geometry of their choice. Expose the wrongdoing and tear open the family and its patrons, or bury the notebooks and become complicit in another vanishing. Khalid felt the presidency of his name shift like an inheritance being measured against conscience. Outside the tall windows, the desert light changed, drawing long, uncompromising lines across the courtyard. He closed the journal slowly, aware that the documents had already begun to rearrange the contours of power, and that the next step would be not only strategy, but affidavit, not only leverage, but truth. The house settled with the weight of a decision waiting to be made. A slow campaign of pressure unfurled, precise and almost courteous in its malice, as if civility could disguise coercion. Formal inquiries arrived at Khalid's firm, notarized and insistent, probing philanthropic accounts and partners. Banks, nudged by hushed calls from anonymous guardians of reputation, placed temporary holds on credit. Invitations were quietly withdrawn. Donors asked for reassurances before attaching their names to any program. Carefully worded op-eds and an avalanche of curated posts sought to recast the story as a reckless smear against venerable institutions rather than an appeal for justice. Councilman Faisal refined his tactics with a politician's finesse. Publicly, he spoke of stability and the danger of sensationalism. Privately, he summoned aides, hinted at litigation, and reminded potential allies that careers could be fragile when they crossed certain lines. Defenders of Dr. Omar offered testimonials about institutional care and the hazards of dredging the past. Their legal teams issued cease and desist letters that wore the veneer of civility while threatening crippling suits. Each paper trail, each formal notice, was a blade wrapped in silk. The reprisals cut closer to home. Jumana found her access curtailed and her integrity questioned in memos. Colleagues who had once exchanged confidences now avoided her. Salim noticed surveillance where there had been none. His car was keyed in the garage, a warning left like an ugly signature. Noura's editor received late-night calls from unknown numbers, warning that pursuing the story would risk legal and financial fallout. Rania fed the household grapevine with insinuations that Layla acted from ambition rather than conscience, and those whispers metastasized into suspicion. For Layla, the attacks were not abstract. A falsified report alleging misconduct at previous employers circulated online, animated by anonymous commentators determined to make her appear unreliable. A stranger arrived at the estate claiming to be from social services and asked invasive questions about Zayed. Checks found no record of the agency. An unsigned card left in the nursery showed a photograph of the baby with a blackened corner. An intimidation that dissolved any remaining illusion this was simply about reputation. Khalid marshaled legal teams, polished public statements, and met crisis managers who promised containment. He sanctioned reputational audits and engaged friendly journalists to reframe the narrative, but every defense felt reactive, catching up to an opposition prepared to dirty the battlefield. Zara received pointed letters from social registers, implying continued exposure would render the family pariahs. Invitations that once symbolized status now dangled as conditional favors. The allies paid a price. Jumana's mother received a threatening call. Salim found a nicked tire and a note that made work feel dangerous. Noura's primary source withdrew, terrified by overt intimidation. Their small circle began to fray, courage eroding under economic and social pressure. In the hush, after another evening of controlled outrage, Layla rocked Zayed and felt the stakes sharpen into something visceral. This campaign did more than threaten property and prestige. It reached for what she loved most. The team's fight for truth had provoked forces willing to make danger personal, and the Al-Hassan name now hung between two possibilities: public ruin or the fragile, costly victory of a reckoning that might spare none of them. The metallic tang in the air spoke of an approaching storm, and the bitter taste of betrayal curdling the Al-Hassan estate. Layla, outwardly composed, felt Rania's thinly veiled animosity, and Faisal's calculated inquiries tighten an invisible net. Rather than deterring her, they sharpened her resolve, confirming the truth buried beneath generations of lies. Khalid bore the weight of shifting dynamics too. The palace's familiar hum, once a lullaby of inherited power, now resonated with the frantic energy of their clandestine search. Each bureaucratic obstruction recalled his father's past reach. He realized the fight had become a systemic battle against entrenched privilege, a struggle for their lineage's soul. Their focus narrowed on the whispered legend of the hidden infinity pool oasis. What had sounded like a euphemism for Rashid's burial ground now appeared as a tangible key to the past. Salim, the seasoned private investigator, began meticulous inquiries into land deeds, blueprints, and faded construction manifests. A slow unearthing of forgotten details, each fragment a potential breadcrumb to the secluded sanctuary. Jumana, from her precarious position at Al-Fajr, launched a covert search through archived patient records and staff testimonies for any mention of a special project or concealed area linking to the oasis. Her access was double-edged, shadowed by exposure. Yet Amina's documented suffering propelled her forward. Noura, the journalist, assembled the narrative for a wider audience, framing the story as an examination of institutional accountability rather than a personal vendetta. Her carefully researched, subtly provocative articles would test the waters, hinting at deeper truths, while Salim and Jumana worked inside. Their collaboration became a delicate symphony of stealth and strategy. In quiet moments, Layla returned to Amina's study. The scent of dried flowers and old paper reminded her of the woman who had challenged the status quo. The desert rose beneath its glass dome, glowed with a faint internal light, a beacon of resilient beauty amid their quest. Searching for the oasis was also a journey into the Al-Hassan morale landscape, forcing them to confront the contrast between public facade and hidden injustice. Khalid wrestled with implications. His father's legacy, once a source of pride, frayed into a fragile tapestry. He saw his own ambition mirrored in the past, a warning about unchecked power. The palace's corridors became a maze, each turn promising truth or a new trap. External pressures, from Rania's whispers to Faisal's veiled threats, intensified, but the resolve of Layla, Khalid, Jumana, Salim, and Noura hardened into a fragile bulwark. They understood the oasis was more than place. It was a symbol where a buried life might finally speak, where silence could be broken and delayed justice emerge. The air, metallic with the storm, now carried a faint scent of damp earth and burgeoning life, a promise of renewal. The journey to the hidden oasis had begun, each step echoing with forgotten history and the promise of a revelation that would alter the Al Hassan legacy. The journey to the hidden oasis had begun, each step echoing with forgotten history and the promise of a revelation that would alter the Al Hassan legacy. The metallic tang on Khalid's tongue sharpened, a constant reminder of the encroaching storm, as he felt the subtle tremor of the ground shifting beneath their opulent world. His carefully constructed life, once a fortress of inherited privilege, now felt like a fragile shell, cracking under the relentless pressure of unearthing Rashid's truth. Layla, a silent force beside him, navigated the currents of deceit with a quiet dignity that both humbled and infuriated him. What began as a reluctant partnership, born of necessity and his mother's stern hand, was slowly transforming into something deeper, a shared purpose that transcended their disparate stations. He found himself relying on her unwavering conviction, a moral compass in a landscape obscured by shadows and lies. The hum of the palace, once a comforting backdrop to his days, now pulsed with a clandestine energy, a symphony of hushed phone calls, urgent meetings, and the rustle of ancient documents. Salim, the private investigator, moved with the stealth of a desert fox, his inquiries into the old land deeds and blueprints becoming a meticulous excavation of the past. Each discovered fragment, a surveyor's mark on an outdated map, a faded invoice for specialized construction materials, was a minute victory against the tide of deliberate obfuscation. Jumana, risking her own career at Al-Fajr, delved into the clinic's shadowed archives, her courage a testament to Amina's enduring spirit. Her discreet searches for special projects or restricted areas were like navigating a minefield, yet the knowledge of Amina's suffering and Rashid's erasure fueled her quiet defiance. Noura, the journalist, worked with a different kind of precision, her articles carefully crafted, each word a subtle probe into the Al Hassan narrative, laying the groundwork for a public reckoning without revealing the full, devastating scope of their findings too soon. Their collaboration, a delicate weave of intellect and intuition, was a fragile bulwark against the mounting resistance. The subtle hostility from Rania intensified, her whispers now laced with a venomous intent, attempting to isolate Layla and undermine her influence among the household staff. Khalid saw it for what it was, a desperate attempt to maintain a decaying order. Councilman Faisal's veiled threats, framed as concerns for family reputation, solidified Khalid's understanding of the deep-seated corruption they faced. The network of privilege, once a source of comfort, now felt like an insidious web, its tendrils reaching out to protect its own, regardless of the truth. Yet, the pressure, rather than deterring them, hardened their collective resolve. The Al Hassan estate, with its sprawling corridors and hidden alcoves, felt less like a home and more like a battlefield, the silence punctuated by the approaching storm. Khalid, once a master of control, was learning to trust the unfolding chaos, recognizing that only through its turbulence could true clarity emerge. The faint scent of damp earth and burgeoning life, a promise of renewal, now mingled with the metallic tang, a harbinger of the profound metamorphosis awaiting their world. The journey was not just about finding Rashid, it was about reclaiming the very soul of their dynasty, a harrowing passage through the labyrinth of their own making, towards a truth that would reshape everything they knew. The hidden currents beneath the calmest surfaces were finally breaking through, threatening to capsize their gilded world, but also promising a foundation built on something far more enduring than silence. The long-held silence, once a protective shroud, now ripped open, revealing a maelstrom beneath the placid surface of their lives. For Khalid, the realization that his family's hallowed history was a carefully constructed fiction hit with the force of a physical blow, a chilling wind sweeping through the sky lounge, carrying the metallic tang of ruin. His father's meticulously crafted legacy, once an unshakable edifice, disintegrated before his eyes, each fragment a shard of betrayal. Layla, however, felt a different kind of tremor, a deep, resonant hum of vindication. The faint scent of damp earth, mingling with the fragile desert rose, now seemed to whisper Amina's name, confirming a truth she had always intuitively known. The scattered fragments of their investigation, Salim's unearthed blueprints detailing a hidden subterranean structure, Jumana's chilling discovery of suppressed patient records at Al-Fajr, referencing Project Oasis, and Noura's meticulously cross-referenced historical documents, hinting at a forced institutionalization, coalesced into an undeniable narrative. Rashid was not merely a tragic memory. He was a deliberate erasure, a life sacrificed at the altar of dynastic pride. The hidden infinity pool oasis, once a poetic euphemism, revealed itself as a chillingly concrete prison, a place of forced seclusion and quiet suffering, designed to eliminate any challenge to the Al-Hassan lineage. The weight of this revelation pressed down on Khalid, crushing his ingrained denial, leaving him raw and exposed. He saw his own ambition, his own unwavering loyalty to the family name, reflected in his father's cruel choices, a distorted mirror showing the lengths to which power would go to preserve itself. The gilded opulence of their palace, once a source of comfort, now felt suffocating, its grandeur tainted by the ghosts of injustice. Rania's thinly veiled hostility and Councilman Faisal's insidious pressures, once irritating obstacles, now appeared as desperate attempts by the old guard to maintain the decaying illusion, their actions screaming of complicity. Zahra, her face etched with a profound sorrow that transcended generations, watched Khalid as he finally processed the magnitude of the deceit. Her silent strength had guided him to this precipice, but the jump into truth was his alone. He felt a profound sense of inherited shame, a collective burden that demanded not just acknowledgement, but an active, painful dismantling of the very foundations upon which his life was built. The silence that had once protected them was now a deafening roar, reverberating through the marble halls, demanding a reckoning that would either shatter them completely or forge a new path. The journey was no longer merely about finding Rashid. It was about tearing down the walls of their gilded cage, exposing the rot within, and rebuilding their legacy on the unyielding bedrock of truth. The metallic tang, once foreboding, now carried a strange, purifying energy, a promise of a future where honor was earned, not inherited. The desert wind, once a gentle sigh, now howled with the urgency of a storm, poised to cleanse their world and usher in an uncompromising dawn. The confrontation with the past was not just imminent, it was already underway, its irreversible currents pulling them all into its transformative embrace, leaving no escape from the harsh, liberating light. The liberating light that had been a distant promise now streamed unmercifully into every corner of the Al-Hassan world, stripping away illusions and exposing truths that had festered beneath generations of opulence. Khalid, his face a mask of disillusionment, felt the foundations of his inherited reality tremble. Each exposed lie felt like a personal betrayal. The metallic tang in the air was no longer a hint, but an undeniable taste of unfolding ruin, mingling with the persistent scent of desert rose clinging to Layla, a fragile counterpoint to the storm. She stood with quiet resolve, Amina's sacrificed life a sacred trust in her hands, her gaze fixed on the turbulent currents threatening to engulf them. The palace, once a bastion of secrecy, now felt permeable, its grand walls reverberating with an awakened past demanding rectification. The unraveling began with surgical precision. Noura's articles, published under a pseudonym, were woven investigations, each paragraph pulling at Al-Fajr Behavioral Clinic's past and hinting at patterns of institutional malpractice without naming the dynasty outright. The public's reaction was a slow burn, fueling hunger for more and forcing wider scrutiny of the elite. Salim, the discreet private investigator, intensified his work, piecing together Rashid's forced institutionalization. He tracked down former staff, now elderly and burdened by complicity. Their memories were patchworks of fear and fragmented truths. His quiet interrogations in nondescript cafes and shadowed courtyards unearthed chilling details of a protocol designed for erasure, a system perfected to make inconvenient lives vanish. Jumana, her position at Al-Fajr increasingly precarious, became their internal anchor, navigating archived files and copying coded patient summaries and memos that spoke of long-term specialized care and private relocation, euphemisms for Rashid's silent imprisonment. Her courage, born of empathy for Amina's lost voice, shone in the clinic's shadowed halls. Councilman Faisal's pressure, now explicit and laced with threats to Khalid's business, ceased to be mere annoyance and became evidence of a wider conspiracy. His attempts to discredit Noura and obstruct Salim confirmed the depth of entanglement, revealing a network of powerful individuals who had benefited from and protected the Al-Hassan narrative. Rania's bitter whispers within the household escalated to sabotage, spreading rumors to isolate Layla and sow doubt. Instead, her venom exposed a desperate clinging to a dying order, illuminating the moral bankruptcy of the old guard. Khalid watched these maneuvers and felt a cold clarity settle over him. He understood the fight was not only against his father's past, but against a pervasive system of corruption now fighting back. The scale of opposition hardened his resolve, transforming reluctant acceptance into fierce determination. He recognized that this journey was not merely about justice for Rashid, but about redefining honor for the Al-Hassan name. The Grand Palace, once a symbol of untouchable power, now felt like a battleground, its opulent rooms silent witnesses to a war for its soul. Each small victory, each unearthed truth, testified to the fragile yet unyielding alliance forged in the crucible of revelation, a beacon against encroaching darkness. The wind through the sky lounge no longer carried only the tang of ruin. It carried the breath of an uncompromising new era, promising a future built on transparency and earned respect. The path ahead remained fraught, a perilous tightrope over the chasm of their exposed past, but they walked it together, their collective will a fragile, potent force against deception. A new, fragile dawn, born of pain and understanding, broke over the desert, its nascent light illuminating the arduous, necessary journey toward genuine redemption. The arduous, necessary journey toward genuine redemption found its next crucible not in a private study, but under the searing gaze of Dubai's elite at the annual Al-Hassan Charity Gala. The grand ballroom of the royal palace shimmered with aggressive opulence, a calculated display of power and philanthropy. Crystal chandeliers spilled light onto a sea of couture and silks, reflecting off polished marble where the city's most influential moved with practiced grace. The air, usually thick with perfumes and polite conversation, held a faint tremor, a dissonant hum beneath the veneer. Khalid, beside Zara, offered a practiced smile. His eyes, sharp and restless, betrayed the storm beneath. He felt the weight of their collective will pressing against inherited deception. Layla, at the periphery, her presence a quiet counterpoint to the extravagance, felt Amina's spirit like a pulse against her own, insisting this fragile dawn break fully. The evening ran with flawless precision, speeches praising the Al-Hassan legacy, a silent auction, announcements of new philanthropic ventures. Yet for Khalid, each handshake felt tainted, each compliment a hollow echo against mounting truths. He saw his father's ghost in every venerating glance and tasted metallic dread. Zara, regal and composed, moved through the crowd, her calm masking fierce anticipation, a mother's resolve to finally right generational wrongs. She glanced at Layla, a silent acknowledgement of shared battle, a deep understanding bound by memories of lost children and buried secrets. Rania was a discordant note, her watchful eyes darting between Layla and Khalid, whispers laced with venom, clinging to the old order with palpable desperation. As Councilman Faisal took the stage, his booming bonhomie praising the family's commitment, a subtle ripple spread through the room. Heads turned to screens that usually showed desert landscapes or crests. Instead, stark black text began to scroll, intercut with faded, grainy images. It was Noura's work, released with surgical timing. Not a direct accusation, but a meticulously researched chronicle of irregularities at Al-Fajr Behavioral Clinic, hinting at suppressed patient histories and unaccounted private relocations. The hum of conversation faltered, replaced by murmur, then alarm. Faisal's smile froze as screens displayed blurred internal memos mentioning Project Oasis and unusual protocols for long-term confinement. The illusion of an unblemished legacy began to fracture, hairline cracks across the gilded facade. The reaction was a collective intake of breath. Whispers rose into astonished exclamations. The clinking of glasses ceased. Polite silence shattered into an uneasy buzz as the elite scrambled to grasp the implications. Khalid felt dread and grim satisfaction. The long-feared storm had broken, not violently, but in a quiet unraveling. He watched his father's guarded secrets spill onto the screens, undeniable and damning, and felt a liberating release. Zara stood straight,
gaze steady. Her silence became a powerful testament. Layla, at the room's edge, felt Amina's presence surge, a current of vindication. The desert rose. Once an object of contemplation, felt like a heart finally beating free, calling for justice in the heart of a broken dynasty.
The ballroom, once a symbol of untouchable power, had become an arena of reckoning, its opulent rooms silent witnesses to the start of irrevocable change. The music, once a serenade, now felt like a funeral march for a dying era as truth took center stage, stark and unyielding. The ballroom, moments ago a shimmering tableau of power, fractured into a kaleidoscope of shock and outrage. The unyielding truth, delivered not by a voice but by impersonal screens, ripped through the polite facade of the Al Hassan Charity Gala, exposing the raw nerves of a dynasty built on deception. Gasps and furious murmurs rippled beneath crystal chandeliers that now glittered with a cold light. Faces that had worn masks of indifference, contorted with disbelief and dawning comprehension. Whispers, sharp as glass, flew from table to table, dissecting the scandal, apportioning blame, calculating the repercussions that would ripple through Dubai's highest echelons. For many, the Al Hassan name had been untouchable. Its public tarnishing felt like an affront to their own carefully constructed worlds. The opulent room, once a sanctuary of exclusivity, became a theater of judgment, alive with the potent energy of a secret finally unburdened. Khalid, rigid beside Zara, felt a strange mix of dread and relief. The storm he had long anticipated broke not with a roar, but with the chilling scroll of text, each word hammering the gilded cage of his past. The metallic tang in the air, once a harbinger, now tasted of impending ruin and an invigorating clarity. He watched panicked faces, frantic calls, desperate attempts to regain control that was gone. His father's legacy lay exposed, a broken monument to ruthless ambition. Yet amid the chaos, a nascent freedom bloomed. Generations of secrets lifted, replaced by a harsh exhilaration. He met Zara's unwavering gaze, silent acknowledgement of their shared purpose, a bond forged in the crucible of unraveling. Her strength, steady against public scorn, anchored him. Layla, at the periphery, felt vindication, a current of justice through her veins. Amina's spirit hummed with triumph. The faint scent of desert rose and damp earth, a counterpoint to panic's perfume, affirmed the rightness of their journey. She watched the powerful unmasked, the empire crumble, not with malice, but with a quiet duty fulfilled. Shock gave way to damage control. Calls flooded the palace from furious investors and panicked associates, each demanding answers and threatening to sever ties. Influence that once felt impenetrable now showed fissures, foundations eroded by years of deceit. Councilman Faisal, face carved with indignation, became their loudest detractor. His denunciations laced with threats of legal and political retribution as a ravenous media amplified him. Rania, loyal to the old guard, seized the moment to sow discord, twisting whispers into accusations that painted Layla as a malicious instigator. Palace staff, usually silently efficient, moved with uneasy deference. Averted gazes and hushed conversations betrayed the seismic shift. Jumana, the brave administrator, found her position increasingly precarious as internal investigations named her among the whispered suspects, yet she stood firm, her empathy for Amina a shield. Salim, the private investigator, worked openly. His evidence became an irrefutable testament to Rashid's forced institutionalization. Noura, the journalist, shed her pseudonym, her articles now direct and damning, revealing institutional corruption and dynastic ruthlessness. The fragile alliance solidified under pressure. Each member's resolve hardened, their shared conviction a bulwark against the encroaching dark. The Al Hassan family was fully exposed, its secrets laid bare before a global audience, its image shattered beyond repair. The path ahead was perilous, requiring arduous rebuilding, but for the first time in generations, the foundation could be something other than silence. The truth, stark and unyielding, had taken center stage, and the world was watching. The weight of Adnan's confession, a torrent of truth unleashed by a grandson's conscience, cascaded through the hallowed halls of the Al Hassan dynasty, stripping away the last vestiges of denial. His words, delivered with a quiet, devastating certainty, corroborated every fractured detail from Samira's journal and Amina's anguished accounts, creating an unassailable bulwark against the forces of deliberate deception. The legal and moral case, once a precarious tightrope walk, now stood on an unyielding foundation, forcing an overdue reckoning within Dr. Omar's family, and by extension, the entire institution of Al-Fajr. The metallic tang in the air began to recede, replaced by the faint, purifying scent of damp earth, a sign that the ground was finally ready to heal. In the immediate aftermath of this profound corroboration, a new kind of urgency electrified the Al-Hassan estate, one driven not by fear, but by a collective burning need for redemption. Khalid, his face still etched with the raw pain of exposed truths, channeled his inherited drive into a meticulous blueprint for repair. The plans for the Amina Moore Memorial Garden unfolded with a serene gravity, each architectural line a tribute to a life unjustly silenced. Sketches revealed tranquil water features and indigenous flora, a deliberate cultivation of peace where sorrow had once been barren. This was more than a garden. It was a living testament, a space designed to breathe life back into the family's fractured soul. A nursing scholarship, endowed generously in Amina's name, was swiftly announced, a tangible promise to empower those who, like Samira, dared to speak truth in the face of institutional corruption. It was a conscious effort to transmute past wrongs into future empowerment, a beacon for integrity in a profession that had been marred by deceit. The hidden infinity pool oasis, once a chilling symbol of erasure, was gently, reverently reclaimed. Its still dark waters, which had mirrored forgotten shadows, were now meticulously tended, becoming a sacred space of open remembrance, reflecting the clear, unblinking light of newfound honesty. This transformation was a profound act of defiance against the past, a reclamation of sacred ground. Public pressure, a relentless tide of indignation, continued to surge, compelling comprehensive systemic reforms at Al-Fajr Behavioral Clinic. The once impregnable walls of privilege, now riddled with fissures, allowed a cleansing breeze of accountability to sweep through, forcing a long-overdue re-evaluation of its unethical practices. The relentless whispers of public scrutiny became a resounding demand for transparency, a collective voice insisting that such injustices would never again be swept into silence. Layla, a silent force in this unfolding metamorphosis, observed these shifts with a deep sense of purpose, a conviction, a steady flame against the encroaching darkness. Amina's spirit, a constant pulse against her own, felt vindicated, her silent suffering finally given voice. The Al-Hassan family, battered but unbroken, embarked on a harrowing journey toward a future where honor was not inherited, but earned through courageous, often painful, self-examination. The palace, once a gilded cage of secrets, began to breathe with a fragile hope, its grand corridors now echoing with the promise of a legacy built on genuine, unwavering truth. The scent of desert rose and fresh earth, once subtle, now permeated the air with an almost intoxicating sweetness, a fragrant harbinger of a future where justice would finally bloom. The commitment to repair rippled outward from the Al-Hassan estate, each deliberate act reshaping not just physical spaces, but the very fabric of their fractured legacy. The Amina Moore Memorial Garden, now blooming with indigenous flora, was more than a tribute. It was a living, breathing testament to a silenced life, its tranquil water features murmuring a quiet melody of peace. This sacred ground, cultivated from barren grief, stood as a beacon of remembrance, inviting solace where sorrow had once reigned. A nursing scholarship, endowed in Amina's name, empowered aspiring voices, transforming past deceit into a promise of future integrity, a conscious effort to transmute the bitter ashes of injustice into the fertile soil of positive change. The hidden infinity pool oasis, once a chilling symbol of enforced erasure, had undergone a profound metamorphosis. Its still, dark waters, which had reflected only forgotten shadows, were now meticulously tended, their surface mirroring the clear, unblinking light of newfound honesty. This reclamation was a powerful act of defiance, a sacred space reconsecrated for open remembrance. Public pressure, a relentless, righteous tide, continued to surge, driving comprehensive systemic reforms through Al-Fajr Behavioral Clinic. The once impenetrable walls of privilege, now riddled with visible fissures, allowed a cleansing breeze of accountability to sweep through, forcing a long-overdue reckoning with its unethical practices and a re-evaluation of its tarnished past. The relentless whispers of public scrutiny had coalesced into a resounding demand for transparency, a collective voice insisting that such injustices would never again be swept into silence. Layla, a silent force in this unfolding metamorphosis, observed these shifts with a deep sense of purpose, her conviction a steady flame against the encroaching darkness. Amina's spirit, a constant pulse against her own, felt vindicated, her silent suffering finally given its rightful voice. The Al-Hassan family, battered but unbroken, embarked on a harrowing journey toward a future where honor was not merely inherited, but earned through courageous, often painful, self-examination. The palace, once a gilded cage of secrets, began to breathe with a fragile hope, its grand corridors now echoing with the promise of a legacy built on genuine, unwavering truth. The scent of desert rose and fresh earth, once subtle, now permeated the air with an almost intoxicating sweetness, a fragrant harbinger of a future where justice would finally bloom, its delicate petals unfurling in the harsh, yet ultimately redeeming light. The intoxicating sweetness riding the desert wind signaled more than a change in atmosphere. It announced a new Al-Hassan epoch rooted in accountability and compassion. Every sunrise lent purpose to the estate, transforming silent grandeur into a hub of earnest activity, an outward echo of the internal upheaval now made real. The Amina Moore Memorial Garden, its labyrinthine paths tended and frequently visited, hummed with reverence, a living echo of the life it honored. Laughter that had been rare and furtive in the nursery mingled with fountains and the rustle of native flora, weaving life over former grief. School children, bright with curiosity, learned of Amina's courage. Aspiring nurses found inspiration in the scholarship bearing her name, a promise to empower those who, like Amina, spoke truth amid corruption.
This sacred ground became more than a memorial, a sanctuary for collective healing, where the community gathered not in shared sorrow, but in renewed commitment to empathy and justice. The once foreboding hidden infinity pool oasis, restored to a shimmering expanse reflecting the desert sky, stood as a breathtaking symbol of change.
Its clear waters, no longer hiding chilling shadows, invited quiet contemplation, a place where past injustices could be acknowledged and turned into collective purpose. Khalid, his sharp features softened by hard-won humility, worked tirelessly with Layla, his leadership now aimed at dismantling every remnant of his father's deceit. He applied strategy to institutional reform, so Al-Fajr Behavioral Clinic, once a bastion of unethical practice, would become a model of compassionate care and transparent ethics. Public discourse, once a whisper that the powerful dismissed, swelled into a resounding chorus demanding systemic change, proof of their collective courage. The Al-Hassan name, scarred by revelation, was being redefined not by inherited privilege, but by a hard-earned respect that promised endurance. Layla, no longer peripheral but an architect of this new reality, moved through the transformation with quiet, resolute strength. Amina's presence resonated in every reclaimed space, every empowered voice. Her legacy bloomed beyond death, inspiring many. The Grand Palace, once a gilded cage of guarded secrets, had remade itself into a testament to resilience, its corridors echoing a promise of honesty and a future built on truth. The delicate petals of justice, unfurling in the redeeming light of acknowledgement, promised a harvest of lasting change, proof of the power in confronting the past and forging a new path. This was not merely the end of a turbulent chapter, but the audacious opening of a new book, its pages ready for the continuing saga of hope, accountability, and a family bound by hard-won truth. The ancient desert watched with an almost imperceptible nod, the faint echoes of old sorrow mingling with clear notes of a future bravely claimed, a melody to be joined by all who listened.